Anything out?
It's just way too much.
Okay, next we have Mr. Mark Morgan joined the Heritage Foundation as a visiting fellow in February 2021 after served as acting commissioner of U.S. Customs and Border Protection in the Trump administration. I'm sure that's sweet to your ears. Prior to joining Heritage, he oversaw 60,000 employees at U.S. Customs and Border Protection, managed a budget of over $13 billion, and ensured the effective operations of CBP's mission to protect national security while promoting economic prosperity. Morgan directed CBP's three core missions: counterterrorism, border security, and trade enforcement, while facilitating $4 trillion in trade and facilitating travel of over 410 million people through ports of entry. He oversaw the largest law enforcement agency and the second largest revenue collecting source in the federal government. Prior to his CBP service, Morgan served as chief of U.S. Border Patrol in the Obama administration and was acting director of U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Morgan had a 20-year career with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. He joined the FBI in 1996 as a special agent assigned to the FBI's Los Angeles field office. Did I leave anything out?
One thing I have to say,
Yes.
he's also a Marine.
Oh, he's a Marine. Yes, yes. Of course, we can't leave that out. It's not in my notes, and it's not my fault, but yes. Yes. And next we have Andrew Arthur, resident fellow in Law and Policy. Andrew Arthur serves as resident fellow in Law and Public Policy for the Center for Immigration Studies. He began his legal career through the Attorney General's Honors Program as a clerk to Administrative Law Judge Joseph E. McGuire in the Office of Chief Administrative Hearing Officer at the United States Department of Justice, Executive Office for Immigration Review. After a 2-year clerkship with Judge McGuire, he received a second honors program appointment as a trial attorney in the San Francisco District Counsel's Office and later the Baltimore District Counsel's Office of the former Immigration and Naturalization Service. In 1999, he was promoted to the INS General Counsel's Office in Washington, D.C., first as an Associate General Counsel and later as an Assistant General Counsel and Acting Chief of the INS National Security Law Division. In the General Counsel's Office, Mr. Arthur supervised attorneys handling cases involving espionage, terrorism, and persecutors. He also advised the Attorney General, Deputy Attorney General, and INS Commissioner on issues relating to national security. Well, that was a period. I was supposed to pause there, right? In July 2001, Mr. Arthur left the INS to become a counsel on the House Judiciary Committee, where he performed oversight of immigration issues. After 5 years at the House Judiciary, he was appointed to the immigration bench, serving for 8 years as an immigration judge at the York Immigration Court in York, Pennsylvania. At the beginning of the 114th Congress, Judge Arthur left the bench and came back to Capitol Hill, where he served as staff director of the National Security Subcommittee at House Oversight and Government Reform before taking retirement from the federal service in September 2006. He is a graduate of the University of Virginia and of the George Washington University School of Law. Did I get everything?
I was also a state championship hot water football coach.
That's very important when it comes to immigration, right? Okay. Sergio de la Peña, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Western Hemisphere Affairs. His responsibilities included security, defense, and policy issues in the region, as well as overseeing the funding of defense cooperation programs for U.S. Northern Command and U.S. Southern Command. Prior to joining OSD policy, Mr. De La Peña was an independent consultant and defense contractor and an instructor of defense, security, and leadership courses to the government officials and a frequent commentator on Spanish-speaking national and international news media. As an air defense officer, he served in short to high range altitude units that included Chaparral, Hawk, and Patriot systems. He earned his airborne wings and Ranger tab as a cadet. And he was born in Chihuahua, right? And last but not least, we have Melissa Ford. Melissa Ford is the policy director for the Texas Public Policy Foundation, Foundation Secure and Sovereign Texas campaign, which strives to keep our nation safe and free. Melissa's work and expertise is focused on policies that secure the border and restore the rule of law as we fix and improve legal immigration to the United States. Melissa writes about foreign policy, public safety, drug cartels, and organized crime. Melissa was born and raised in, say that. Yeah, Cochabamba, Bolivia, but now calls Texas home. So again, we are very honored that we have such a distinguished panel. And we also have Chief Rodney Scott, former Border Patrol chief under the Trump administration. And they'll be answering some questions. He'll be answering some questions if they're directed to him. But we're going to go ahead and get started, and they're going to tell you a little bit of what their expertise, what they're working on. And again, hopefully they answer some of your questions. Remember that as soon as they're done, we're going to go ahead and get into the questions. There's microphones on both sides. And remember, I will cut you off if you go really long. Not because I was trying to be mean, but because we want to make sure that everybody that has a question or a story to tell is able to do it. So let's go ahead and get started.
So my name is Tom Holman, and as you heard, I've been doing this for almost 35 years. I started as a Border Patrol agent. I climbed the ranks one rung at a time, so I've been doing this a long time. And under President Trump, he nominated me as the ICE director, and I took that job. And I was the first ICE director actually came up through the ranks. So the 20,000 men and women that work for me, I never asked them to do anything that I didn't do myself throughout my career. So I'm going to talk generally right now because I want what's going on right now. You need to understand, regardless of what your opinion is on illegal immigration, there's a lot of opinions of it. Immigration enforcement has always been controversial, right? It's always been a tough subject to deal with. But regardless of what your opinion is on illegal immigration, this administration has created such a crisis that it's not about immigration anymore. It's about border security. And here's the issue. When you cause a crisis this big that has taken 70%, 7 out of 10 agents off the line, off patrol to process, that makes the border vulnerable. Now, that's right now, they're so overwhelmed. Now, when Title 42 ends, means more people come across the border, which means more agents are going to be pulled off the line. What does that mean? That means more fentanyl is going to come across that kills Americans. That means more women and children be trafficked across that border. That means more migrants are going to die. That means more Americans are going to die from drug overdoses. That means more known suspected terrorists are going to cross that border. That means more female migrants are going to be sexually assaulted. Doctors Without Borders did a study. 1/3 of women that make that journey through cartels get sexually assaulted. So when you open the border up the way that this administration has, all that ugly stuff is going to increase. And I've been preaching for a long time in the last year. You got to understand what's happening right now is the biggest national security failure in this country since 9/11. And that's just not a talking point. That's just not, a hit line. Border Patrol has arrested people from 171 different countries. Many of these countries are sponsors of terrorism. They've arrested over 200 people on the terrorist watch list, arrested them. There are 1.7 million gotaways, recorded gotaways, on video, sensor, drone traffic. If you don't think a single one of the 1.7 million didn't come from a country sponsoring terrorism, then you're ignoring the data. Just the rule of chances itself. That's what makes this a huge national security issue. And, people want to, I've been called every name in the book because I work with President Trump. You're a racist. You're a white nationalist. It's garbage. Because when President Trump had illegal immigration down to 83%, which means 83% people were less coming. If you take 83% of cars off the highway, would there be less highway deaths? Of course there are. So when you have 83% less people coming, how many women did get sexually assaulted? How many children didn't die in the river? How many migrants didn't die? How many U.S. citizens didn't die of fentanyl overdoses? How many women weren't sexually assaulted? How many women and children weren't sex trafficked in the United States? How many children were trafficked in the United States that now they've already found 4 meatpacking plants where children are working a midnight shift, cleaning up entrails at night and not getting paid. They're paying off their smuggling fees. People can say what they want. This administration thinks their policies are humane, but they're killing Americans at record numbers. They're killing migrants at record numbers. Since Joe Biden's been president, and I'm going to be political, over 1,700 migrants have died on U.S. soil. Over 100,000 Americans died from drug overdoses of fentanyl that the DEA says 95% comes across the southwest border. A record number of women and children have been sex trafficked in the United States. President Trump's policies were not humane. They saved lives, both migrant lives and U.S. citizen lives. When you make the promise you can enter this country legally, you won't be detained, you'll be transported to the city of your choice at taxpayer expense, you can get work authorization for 5 to 7 years, and even when you lose your case, you understand this, people that claim asylum at the border, 9 out of 10 people who claim asylum at the border never get relief from U.S. courts because they simply don't qualify. Escaping poverty is not a reason to claim asylum, unfortunately. The way the asylum law is, you're escaping fear and persecution from your home government because of race, religion, political affiliation, or participation in a specific social group. That's what asylum is. But the cartels have found loopholes in that system. People cross the border, claim asylum. 9 out of 10 will never get relief. That's just a fact. So people can call them asylum seekers all they want. They're really not. And now we need that type of labor in this country, then it's up to Congress to fix it so they can come to this country with a visa. That way they don't have to pay a cartel. Women don't have to be sexually assaulted. Children don't have to die. In my career, I've held dying children. I've told the story many times. I stood in the back of a tractor trailer with 19 dead migrants at my feet, including a 5-year-old little boy. I've talked to girls as young as 10 that were raped multiple times. Until you look in those eyes and see the soul is dead, that little girl's not going to be the same again. These cartels are ruthless. They're animals. So when you create a crisis like they've created, and don't get me wrong, this isn't mismanagement. This isn't incompetence. This is by design. They ran on open borders, and you got to give them credit. They kept their promise. They have open borders. So please understand that. This isn't about immigration anymore. It's about national security. It's about public safety. And Mark would tell you how many criminals they arrested. Tens of thousands of criminals, including murderers. It's about public safety, public health, and national security. Mark my word, I don't know how many terrorists have come across this border the last 2 years, but someday we're going to find out. And it's going to be a bad day for this nation. With that, I'll turn it over to Mark.
Thanks, Tom. Look, Tom and I, we're good friends, so I feel very comfortable, and the rest of the panel as well, saying this before I start my comments. I want to make sure that everything I say following this first comment is important. We're all for strong border security, full stop. But here's what we also support: legal immigration. That's right. Okay? We get it. Our country was founded on immigrants. We are a nation of immigrants, all in, all day long. We're just asking you to follow the laws of a sovereign nation, do it the right way, do it safely. That's it. And I just want to foot stomp on a couple of things that Tom said. It's very important because he is absolutely correct. What's happening at our border it's not about immigration. That's what the open border advocates, the ideologues want you to believe. Because if you're against what's happening at the border, and if they make it about immigration, therefore you're against immigration, and if you're against immigration, you're a racist. That's the narrative. I promise you, that's just not true. It's a lie. But as Tom said, here's how it works. When you have, right now, what we've seen in 26 months, 6 million total encounters from 171 different countries, plus 1.7 million total gotaways. That is 7.7 million individuals have come to our borders in 26 months. There's no nation on the face of the planet that can handle that or sustain that, not even America. And the result, and this is why I always say, illegal immigration is not a victimless crime. Because when you do that, those limited resources that we have that are on our front lines protecting our nation's safety and national security, they're not there. They're pulled off the front line, away from their national security mission to process those that illegally enter. Our border right now, I promise you, 80 to 90% of border patrol resources, that their statutory mission, that they sacrifice everything every single day to protect us, to stop a vast set of complex threats from coming in, jeopardizing our nation's safety and security. Guess what? They're not there. They're not on the front lines. They're not doing the statutory mission, the law enforcement mission to protect our nation. They're not there. It leaves our borders, as Tom said, completely wide open, completely vulnerable. We've literally handed operational control over to the cartels. This is not about immigration. This is about border security. This is about national security. And so what happens when there's no agents on the line doing enforcement? We've literally handed operational control to the cartels. They exploit it every day. Drugs are coming across, pouring across our open border, killing 9,000 Americans every 30 days. It's equivalent of a fully loaded 747 crashing in a mountainside, killing everybody on board every single day. Ladies and gentlemen, that's insanity. Criminals, and this is where I get a lot of my hate mail. There are very bad people coming across our borders. Now here, did I say they were all bad? No, but that's what's reported, though. And when I make that statement, Commissioner Morgan's, he's a racist. He's saying everybody's bad. No, I didn't say that. In fact, I try it every time. The overwhelming majority of people, even though they're coming across illegal and making our borders unsecure, they are good people. It doesn't make it right.
That's right.
But here's the thing. Tom mentioned 1.7 million total gotaways. Guess what? Right now, here's how it happens. So you come across illegally. The majority of people, they're literally sitting down, waiting for Border Patrol to come get them. Why? Because they're going to be released. Well, if that's the case, think about this. You don't have to be a border security expert. So why do we have a gotaway? If you know that you're going to come across and you're a good person, right? You've got no criminal history. You know you have no ill intent other than you illegally entered. Then why is there a gotaway? Again, common sense. Why? Because in the gotaways are the bad people, and the gotaways are the criminals. Right now, in the first 26 months of this administration, CBP has apprehended over 80,000 criminals. Now think about this, is very important. 90% of Border Patrol resources aren't even there. And this isn't a disrespect to Border Patrol. Some of the criminals they've apprehended, they just simply stumbled across them. 80,000 with 90% of the resources not even on the front line. And among the 80,000, murderers, rapists, pedophiles, aggravated felons, and gang members, including 132 convicted murderers. Convicted murderers among the 80,000 they apprehended. Now I'll go back to the 1.7 million gotaways. Come on. How many murderers, rapists, pedophiles, aggravated felons, and gang members are among the 1.7 million that now call the United States home? And I promise you, they don't stay in El Paso. Now they do devastation as they're going through El Paso. Do what?
Yeah, there you go.
Oh, sorry. So they do devastation as they're going through, but they make their way to every town, city, and state in this country. And let me give you a stat right here in Texas. From 2011 to 2022, 261,000 illegal aliens committed 433,000 crimes, including 800 homicides, 800 kidnappings, and 5,000 assaults. And that was in the state of Texas alone. This isn't about immigration. This is about border security. And as Tom said, I spent 20 years in the FBI. I deployed overseas. I was in a war zone. I was in Iraq. I was a deputy on-scene commander of all counterterrorism operations in the FBI. I know counterterrorism. I promise you, our borders are a national security threat and vulnerability. He talked about the hundreds of illegal aliens that have been apprehended on the FBI's terror screening database. Okay, I'll go back to the 1.7 million. How many illegal aliens on the FBI's terror screening database are among the 1.7 million? The truth is, we don't know. That should scare all of us. That should shock all of us. That should unite all of us. If the drugs coming across killing does it, if the criminals coming across taking more American victims does it, the national security threat could. We literally could have the next terrorist sleeper cell in the United States planning the next terrorist attack, and we would have no idea. It's not about immigration. It is about border security. And the last thing that I'll say, I have to emphasize what Tom said. The most inhumane thing that we can do as a country for the migrants themselves is to have open borders. If you give them hope that you're going to allow them to break the law and illegally enter, guess what they're going to do? They're going to sacrifice it all. They're going to travel 80 miles with no water, no medical care. They're going to put their lives knowingly in the hands of the cartels. 53 last year died of asphyxiation in a tractor trailer. 1,600 dead migrants at our borders. That doesn't include the migrants that died in Mexico, the Darien Gap. I can't tell you how many Border Patrol agents' lives will never be the same because they've interviewed 14-year-old girls who recounted that they were raped multiple times, or the 12-year-old that had the morning after pills that were provided by her mother because it was anticipated she was going to be raped on the journey. What? This is insanity. Our compassion has been hijacked. Our compassion is misguided. If you really have compassion for those looking for a better life, shut down our borders, secure them, and enhance and improve our legal immigration process. That's going to save the lives of immigrants, and it's going to save the lives of Americans.
So I have the unenviable task of following Mark Morgan. But God love his passion, and God love Tom's passion. Between the three of us, we've been involved in national security, involved in protecting this nation for 90 years, which speaks to how old we all are. But let me give you a quote, and you tell me who said this. You're not going to like to hear this. Some of you aren't going to like to hear this. But I believe in walls. When we have barriers along the border, drugs can't get into the United States, and we could save Americans' lives. Not a wall from ocean to ocean, but a wall where we need a wall in large metropolitan centers. Who said that? Anybody want to guess? Joe Biden said that in 2007 in Iowa. Going to give you another one. We don't want parents trusting their children to smugglers. These are bad, very bad people. They do bad things, and I don't want to tell you this, but many of these children are sexually assaulted. You have no idea how bad these people are. Anybody want to guess who said that? Joe Biden, June 2014, Guatemala City. Joe Biden, up until the point at which he became president, about a year before he became president, said all the right things. He had all the right ideas. He had the interest not only of the American people at heart, but he had the interest of the migrants at heart. That's why he was in Guatemala City in June of 2014. Because he was down there meeting with the heads of El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras, as we call them, the Northern Triangle countries, to try to convince people not to come to the United States. Somewhere along the way, and I don't want to get into the pastor's business, but on his road to Damascus, things went horribly wrong. We understand what we're supposed to do. We're a republic. Power is vested in the people in this room, and it's important that you understand that. You are the power of the United States. We have no king but God. And your elected representatives speak for you. And here's what your elected representatives have said. Border Patrol has a duty. The primary duty of the Border Patrol is to stop terrorists from coming into the United States. With that in mind, Listen to what Tom told you, especially listen to what Mark told you. 90% of the people who are out there, Southwest border is 1,954 miles long. There are 16,670 Border Patrol agents full-time on it. They work 50-hour shifts. At any given time, there are 5,500 people on the border. When 90% are gone, that leaves you with about 500 people for a 1,954-mile border. National security is the one thing that ties us all together. And when you talk about Sergio, we can't even touch that. We vested our lives in protecting this nation, its people, and its institutions. 500 people are out there, day and night, in the rain, in the dark, in the cold, in the heat, defending a 1,954-mile border. How successful do you think they're going to be? Congress has said, every person who comes into the United States, we're going to detain them. Not because we're bad, not because we're mean, but because we don't know who those folks are. Some of them may have asylum claims. You heard what Tom said. Between 2009 and 2017, the people that entered the United States illegally, who were apprehended and released, again in violation of law, were twice as likely not to show up in court as they were to be granted asylum in court. Getting asylum, especially today, isn't really the goal. Entering the United States is the goal. That's not what the law says. We want to grant asylum. We look around the world. We look, at many of the nations directly to our south. We look at Bishop Rolando Alvarez in Nicaragua, who was in jail because he dared to speak out against the Sandinista government. The United States government isn't protecting him, isn't going to the Sandinista government and saying, give us Rolando Alvarez. It is opening the doors and treating everybody who can make it to the southwest border as if they are an asylee. And when you do that, you create, and guess who said this? You're going to get this one wrong. A flashing come in, we're open sign at the southern border that is encouraging millions of people to risk their lives coming to the United States. That was Judge T. Kent Wetherell in a case called Florida versus United States. He said that on March the 8th. You're going to hear that people are coming here because of poverty or crime or violence. Jesus said the poor have always been with us. Poverty, crime, and violence have existed. As Americans, we have a duty to our regional partners to make those countries better, to give them the rule of law, to root out corruption, to lift up the populations of all of our regional neighbors. And as Mark alluded to at the beginning of his statements, we are a generous country when it comes to immigration. I believe in immigrants. I named my son after the patron saint of immigrants. The most sacred thing, the most important thing in my life. I believe in immigration. If the Biden administration keeps doing what it's doing, I'm going to give you another quote, and I love quotes. And this one's from Barbara, Ms. Jordan. She was a congresswoman from Houston. She was the first African-American woman ever elected to Congress in the South. And she said, if we can't control illegal immigration, I fear that we're going to destroy Americans' faith in immigration. And in that, our interest in immigration itself. When you look around the country, when you travel around the country, as Tom and Mark and I and Sergio do, and I'm getting the thing. I told Mark to keep his remarks short. I'm breaking the law.
I was only a minute over.
I'm breaking the rules. Gallup did a poll 6 months ago. The plurality of Americans right now want to cut legal immigration to the United States. After 2 decades of Americans, by a majority, saying we want as much immigration, legal immigration, as we can have. That's what Joe Biden did on his road to Damascus. And with that, I hand it over to Sergio.
Well, good afternoon. It's a real privilege and a pleasure to be here. I've heard the statistics, and it's coming from the experts, so I'm not going to repeat those. And that's part of the challenge of sitting up here and having somebody speak before you have notes, and then you just throw them out the window. So one of the things that I want to talk about is, tell you stories so much as opposed to statistics. So I was born in Chihuahua, Mexico. Today I was at the building where I processed into the United States in 1961, January 26th, after a year of going back and forth and getting all of our los papeles, get them all straight. We came to the United States. And yesterday on the way over to Irene's house, I saw a cotton field and I saw a concrete ditch. I used to pick cotton. And on the way out to Columbus yesterday, I saw a giant cotton picker. And I thank Lord for a cotton picker, because it took me out of the fields out of 5 seasons out of picking cotton. So as a cotton picker that came to the United States, I was blessed to serve in the United States Army for 30 years. And then as part of the Trump administration, I've had 34 years of national security service. That to me was a privilege. And so the story I want to tell you is that for the 30 years I was in the Army, our biggest threat was communism. Now, communism is alive and well today. And I can tell you, having been over to Juarez today with 3 of my best buddies, including Melissa, we saw the way that this system is set up, where these people know what Title 42 is. They know what Title 8 is, and the ramifications of each of those. And this immigration flow is not something that happened by accident, because there's all sorts of facilitators to get things through. This is not just including the coyotes, but let me go back to communism. So as a lieutenant, I was in the Fulda Gap, ready for the Soviet Union to invade. They didn't do very well. They eventually fell apart. And so when the wall collapsed, communism we thought was over. Not necessarily. At that point, someone by the name of Fidel Castro and his big buddy, Ignacio Lula da Silva, created what was known as the Foro de Sao Paulo. And the Foro de Sao Paulo was designed to spread socialist Marxist ideology throughout the hemisphere. So when the wall collapsed, Fidel knew we've got to continue this Communist International thing, because the only way that we're going to be able to sustain power is we can sell the idea of hope, where everybody's going to be equal, meaning everybody's going to be equally poor and miserable. Mm-hmm. And he did a fantastic job of that. Now, who taught him all that stuff? Fidel Castro. Fidel Castro also modified his way of conducting business, because he started out by saying, let me see if I can create these insurgencies throughout Latin America that were sponsored by, guess who? The Soviet Union. And so Fidel Castro realized, okay, that doesn't work. I got to rethink this thing, because every time I do one of these insurgencies, I get my clock cleaned. So what he came up with is, in accordance with communist ideology, lo que no se gana por el voto se gana por la bala, y lo que no se gana por la bala se gana por el voto. In other words, what you can't gain through the vote, you do it by the bullet. If you can't do it by the bullet, you go back to the vote. And guess what's happening now? Let's talk about the history of this hemisphere just in the last 2 years. When we were in the Pentagon, we had the best alignment with our Latin American partners in our history. Since then, let's take a look. Bolivia has gone to the socialist again. Peru has gone to the socialist again. Chile went to the socialist again, though it seems like they're waking up, and they thought they were going to change the constitution, then finally said, no, not so fast, Charlie, but it's not for a lack of trying. In Colombia, socialist. So let's talk a little bit about, President Petro. That guy was a member of the M19 guerrilla group, the one that killed 9 magistrates and about 70 individuals, and now he's the president of Colombia. Do you think he's a Democrat? I don't think so. You got the former wife of Mel Zelaya in Honduras that's a declared socialist. And then, to add insult to injury, Lula is back, a convicted felon who had a 12-year prison sentence get cut because there were irregularities in their Supreme Court, so that guy's back in office. So what does all this have to do with us? If we do not have a good understanding of who's coming in, as both Tom and Mark have pointed out, there's a lot of bad guys coming in right now that we don't know who they are. We do know that about 200 have gotten in because we've found them. But how many others are getting through in between? When they had the massive surge in Del Rio, when you had like 14,000 people under the bridge, guess what? The CBP and all of our law enforcement officials on the border were tied up processing people. That means that anything in between the ports of entry was left open because there's nobody out there to be able to monitor because of the flows. And guess who is taking advantage of that? So these are the challenges that we face. Now, if you look at the security threats, let me give you a little anecdote. When I was on September 11th, I was in South Argentina doing an exercise with the Argentines. Nobody would ever think that somebody was going to crash a plane into the Pentagon or the Twin Towers, and then the third was headed somewhere in Washington, D.C. But it happened. Now we don't know who's here and when they're going to attack. They're here, they're organizing, and if it's not them, guess what? All of these leaders that I talked about, do you think they're going to be as interested in helping out the United States and sharing intelligence? Probably not. So what that means is they are more likely to turn a blind eye to that. And there's one partner that I forgot to include in here that's against us, the Chinese. You got the Russians with the ideology, you got the Cubans with the execution, and then you got the Chinese with the money. So the Chinese are going to be part of this whole package, and what that means is that we are living in a situation where it's just a matter of when are they going to attack. And if 9/11 was something that really surprises, don't be surprised if the next attack is a lot worse. And this is the reason that we're up here, and this is the reason that we want to tell you about what this is so you can share it and make sure that people understand the gravity of the problems that we're facing. Anyway, thank you very much.
Hi everyone, my name's Melissa. You might be surprised that I'm filling in for a colleague that was supposed to be here, Josh. He wasn't able to be here at the last moment, but I'm really happy that I could be here. I think I speak for everyone on the group when I say thank you for being so welcoming. We've all been able to have really good conversations with some of you already, and we've been able to see how passionate so many of you are about the issue of border security. And I just want to say thank you for telling us your stories. It's different to see it by being here, and it's no longer an issue. I think you all know that, but it's no longer just a border issue or just an issue of El Paso. We've heard about it from a lot of Texans, we've heard about it from a lot of Americans, but it's no longer just something that's happening in El Paso and Del Rio, but we're hearing people talk about it in Washington State and North Dakota and New York. And the reality though is that we feel it so much more here in Texas, right? And you feel it so much more along the border. And we've seen it this week. We saw it today when we were in Mexico, and the polling has been very consistent when people say that it's the #1 issue for Texans. And I think that you've all felt it because growing up, so many people used to cross over into Mexico and to have lunch or to go shopping, and it wasn't a big problem, and now there's so much fear surrounding the border. And so I know a lot of us are already a little bit depressed hearing about all the very negative statistics, and honestly, they're scary, and it's very important to be aware of it, but I'm not here to try to give you numbers. I think a lot of you are already very aware of what's happening at the border, but I just want to tell you that there are people that are working for you. There are people that are working really hard to pass some meaningful legislation that will hopefully be felt here at the border if it's passed. But I just want to tell you a little bit. I want to be brief. I know you have a lot of questions, I'm sure, and we'd love to hear your stories, but I want to tell you a little bit about our foundation, the Texas Public Policy Foundation. We're based in Austin, and we are the largest state think tank in the U.S. We do research, and we use that research to try to educate policymakers and the public and pass meaningful legislation that will have a big impact across Texas. And I want to tell you a little bit about what we found through all of our research and some of the legislation that we're trying to push right now. But our campaign, the Secure and Sovereign Texas campaign, was born out of this big gap that we noticed. There's been a lot of work on immigration in the past couple of years, And then we realized that you can't really work on immigration if the federal government just refuses to do its job. But we also realized that Texas is not completely powerless if the federal government decides that they don't want to do their job. So our campaign was born out of that, to try to see what we could do to get some state level solutions to make a change here in Texas. And what we found is, we've done a lot of research on Mexico, and what we found is, number one, that the Mexican government is not our ally. They are partnered with the Mexican drug cartels. They are colluding at every level of the government. They're colluding at every level of the military, law enforcement, all of it. And so we've realized that it's not likely to have good cooperation with the Mexican government and find a solution to immigration or any other sort of issues with them. And so Texas needs to step up, and Texas needs to be strong and step up to the plate. And we've also done a lot of research on the cartels, and we found that they are more armed, they are bolder, they are wealthier than ever, and they're not going to stop. So we need to set our foot down and find more solutions at the state level to put an end to what's happening in our communities, the crime, the unprecedented level of violence, the record amount of drugs that are coming in, some of the things that the panelists just mentioned. And so I just want to tell you guys that we at the Texas Public Policy Foundation are working really hard right now towards the tail end of session to pass some bills. And I'd love to walk you through them. There's a lot. I can give you my card and you can find some of them on our website. But we've been up there pushing it like crazy. We've been testifying. And just to give you a little bit of color on some of the things that we're doing, there's a bill right now that is making it a state offense or a felony for people to cross over illegally into Texas, which is crazy because it sounds like that should already not be legal. But believe it or not, that's something that has been left to the federal government for a really long time. So that's something that we're working on. We are working on a bill that will make it easier and give more tools to prosecutors to more aggressively go after cartels. That's one thing we're working on, so that prosecutors can just be ruthless with the cartels that have done so much harm to our communities. And then we're also looking at other options, more unorthodox options that really try to get to the root of the problem, but we are working on legislation that goes after the corrupt people that are working with the cartels, so the Mexican elites. And we found that they're working together, and they are a lot of the time funding the cartels. They're accepting these huge bribes to look away from the cartel activity. And so we are trying to find ways that we can crack down on a lot of the government officials that are spending their wealth here, or a lot of the Mexican elites and business owners that are coming into the state of Texas, buying property, living large, and that's something that we need to crack down on too. There's been recent, and I mean a month ago, the governor of Tamaulipas, the former governor and a presidential candidate, was arrested right here in Texas after he was caught smuggling so much money and money laundering and just using it to buy all sorts of real estate in Texas. And this is a problem too, because it's emboldening the cartels, it's making them richer, and it's making them more powerful. So we need to look at all options that we can to crack down on that. And I'd love to talk to you about it. I'd love to give you my card so that we can tell you a little bit about what we're working on, what bills we're trying to push. But I wanted to end it on an optimistic note, just to let you know that we are working hard, and there are a lot of legislators that have seen this issue and are working hard on this issue. So thank you. I would love to talk to you guys and answer your questions.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and open it for questions. Again, there's this mic and there's the opposite mic, and let's try to keep it at a very short. Ask your questions so they have the opportunity to answer you. Don't all walk up at the same time. Okay, go ahead.
Hi, I'd like to begin. I believe that is here, and so what I, if you're going to be, televising, this is what I think every American wants. and I want to thank conservatives for holding back and not snapping like a lot of people are with and lawlessness. And please continue that. Things that were said that Mr. Holman said that there's a lot of controversy with border issues, and forgive me for being naive, but the law is the law. And so also, I mean, off the top of my head, I'm thinking the process should start in their home country. And then there was another statement that was made, and that our representatives work for us, and we don't feel that. We don't believe that. And what I think all of us here are asking you all, because you have the experience, please do something. Please mobilize Washington, or mobilize whatever authority you all have to get our country back. I don't think we'll ever be what we were, but we don't want to lose our country. And Melissa, thank you so very much. That was very encouraging that there's policies and laws that are being worked on, and I would like to get your card. But again, we as America, the people, we're like, we don't know what to do. And so please, go ahead.
First of all, I don't know the rest of the panel, but me and Mark travel around the country constantly having events like this to explain to American people what's going on the border. So we're doing everything we can, stepping it up. What you can do is call your congressman and senator.
We do.
And even if they're Republican, don't let them tell you, well, the Democrats own the Senate, we can't make changes. The hell they can. They can boycott. They don't have to sign an infrastructure bill. They don't have to sign a budget bill. They can tell the Democrats, you know, we're not going to pass any legislation, give you any wins until you secure the border. Show us one thing to secure the border. As far as the controversy has been around for decades. I know it shouldn't be that way, but I can tell you, as a guy who woke up Sunday morning to a couple hundred protesters from my house, for a guy who dealt with numerous death threats, not only against me, but my family, to get a letter with a picture of my son walking to school and going to karate practice, saying they're going to take him out, believe me, it's been very controversial. And your last question about don't give up and do something, we're trying to do it right now. And I can tell you right now, in 2024, the right guy get back in the White House, I'll be back and I'll do something. Guaranteed. We'll fix it. We'll fix it. And I'm so angry, I'll come back for free. And I had dinner with President Trump 2 weeks ago. He comes back, I come back. Look, people can hate Trump all you want. You can't argue we had the most secure border in my lifetime. I've done it for 35 years. So, and I know Mark's just itching to say he's going to fight the fight too, but me and Mark's had many discussions. We're back in the game in a heartbeat. The right guy gets back in the White House. Until then, they're not going to shut us up. We're going to tell the American people the truth of what's going on. And what the United States government should do, the Republicans and Democrats, they should be impeaching Mayorkas tomorrow.
That's right.
So have you all seen it's a long time ago, so it shows my age, but remember the movie Backdraft?
Oh, yeah.
Right. All right. So he goes, I go. All right. So I want to put something else you can do. And I know this, okay, vote.
That's right.
Vote. Right. Look, this is what I believe. On the border security issue alone, we lost. We in November. It was unbelievable to me. And that shows that we're not doing enough. We need to do more. Like right now. You guys, grassroots, we were talking about this last night. This is where it's all at, right here, you. So tonight, when you on your way home tonight, text somebody, call somebody. Tomorrow, have a conversation with somebody. Mobilize your friends, mobilize your colleagues. Don't end it tonight. That's what has to happen. Look, H.R. 2 just passed the House just today, and it passed 219 Republicans voted for it, 2 didn't. So the first thing I would say, you should know the 2 Republicans that did vote for it, and they should never hold office again. That's right. That's right. Right? Not a single Democrat voted. Now look, there are issues with H.R. 2. Personally, I think it's the silver. It's not gold. Right? I think it should be stronger. But having said that, it's the strongest border security that Congress has ever passed, and not a single Democrat voted for it. So why would anybody then vote for them when they're destroying the nation, they're destroying your community? So I'm not just trying to be flip. I'm saying get mobilized, go out and vote, and make sure the people that are supposed to represent you understand the importance of border security and how it impacts your community.
Sergio, coming back.
I'm coming. Okay, so I'm one of these white racist, supremacist, cotton pickers. I saw what was happening in the lovely Commonwealth of Virginia, that when I was a little kid sitting in Roswell, New Mexico, I thought that everything was desert. And then I get to Virginia and it's not. And so in one generation, I went from not speaking a word of English to applying for the job held by Patrick Henry, Thomas Jefferson, and James Monroe. So when I say get involved, what we need to do is remember that we're Americans first. That's right. I mean, I'm an American. Y si quieren lo mexicano que también soy, porque yo no necesito tratar de disfrazar. Yo soy precisamente lo que soy mexicano. So what I'm saying is that this is a beautiful country, because nowhere in the world, in the history of humanity, has there been a country where you can take somebody that was totally 100% Mexican, become 100% American, and not be in conflict. There's nobody that says you can't be of a Mexican. What we need to do is tell our American family, our American brothers and sisters, regardless of where they came from, that we need to stop paying for an act of contrition for a sin not committed. This is ridiculous. We need to get vocal. We need to say stop. Remember what Jesus said. They are going to hate you. Right now, look at the garbage that's going on with LGBT satanic crap that is trying. Sorry, Pastor, my bad. We need to come together as one family of Americans, because there's no other country that had success that this wonderful country has had in making the American dream is it is not unique. Every one of you has lived it. That's right. Thank you.
And I'm not going to let them talk without saying something myself. You know, you can talk amongst yourselves. You can hear us talk. You know, who's against us? You know, who is holding us back? You can do. And I've been involved in and around politics for 30 years. The biggest enemy of any group of Americans getting together is despair. The people who want something different than what you want you to despair. I'm never going to win. We're never going to make it. Listen to what Mark said. You know, you can't get bills passed because you don't have the Senate. You can't get something done. What can you do? What can you do? Exactly what you're doing here tonight. If the people lead, the leaders will follow. Gandhi said that, and it is true today as it ever was. Do not despair. Be not afraid. I am with you always, saith the Lord. When you are united, when 2 or more are united in my name, I am there. You have the greatest force in the history of mankind with you. Look around you. These are the people who want a future, who want the beautiful America that we all believe in. We need to make that happen. Again, I agree with Mark. HR 2 is not perfect. It's a good bill. It's not perfect. And right now, it's probably going nowhere in the Senate right now. Because people need to call their representatives. And again, I'm with the 501c3. I can't recommend any particular piece of legislation. But if there's a bill out there that you like, you need to ask your representative why it's not coming to the floor, why it's not being voted on, why it's not getting passed. What are people doing? Right now, we have the mayor of New York, Eric Adams, who is telling us that there is an emergency in his city. Do you know what that emergency is based on? 39,000 people have shown up in his city of 8.6 million. There are 10 New Yorkers for every one El Pasoan. If he's got an emergency that requires $4 billion in federal funding, what does El Paso have? So, don't despair. Don't be angry, but demand change.
I hate to disagree.
Actually, you don't.
Yeah, I hate to disagree with my colleague. I say get angry, right? You get pissed off. You should. I mean, clearly I am. I think that'll get that passion going, and it'll hopefully energize you to get out and take action. And I agree with him. You being here is huge. This is huge. We get a lot more being here than we're giving you. But like I said, it can't stop. Tonight's just the beginning.
So one of the things that I do when I am interviewed, I give out my phone number, and I get blasted with phone calls. And what I found lately is that people are desperate for answers, and they're desperate for hope. And I hope that after we have a short conversation that I've given them that hope. But what really alarms me, and I don't know if you all have found this, is the first question I ask people is, who's your representative? And I'm talking about 20-year-olds to 80-some-year-olds. And the majority of the people, maybe 6 out of 7, don't know who their representative is. Yes, we're angry, and yes, we're going to take our country back. But we're going to do it using the beautiful blueprint that our forefathers gave us, which is the Constitution. We are not people of violence, but we are going to demand change. So in El Paso, we have changed, 12% in the last 4 years, with no support from bigwigs that control the party. We do have 13.1% to go. And if there's anything that should encourage everybody here, is that we've gained the 12%. And that means that people in El Paso, especially right now, are ready for somebody to say, I'm a Republican, and you should vote Republican, because if you're tired of what's happening on the border, and that our representative just secured $12 million, not for us, for the illegals, and they will get angry, and I agree with Mark, we should get angry. Because until people feel the anger, they're not going to change. But we need to get involved. Does anybody else have a question or a comment? Somebody told me about a story, and I'm looking straight at her, and I think it's important that they hear the story that you told me right before it started. Are you going to say it? Yes? Yes.
Hello. I know a little bit about immigration. I retired from Immigration and ICE like 15 years ago. So I know that when I was working with the Cuban programs in Florida and in Arkansas, Castro had released he had opened up the mental institutions and all the jails, prisons, and he sent them here. And this is what I'm hearing with the Venezuelans. Do you all know about that?
Yep. Yes.
It's true, then.
Yes.
So another little story I was telling Harry, a good friend of mine, he comes to a church up here in Central, and his pastor asked him, come on, brother, sponsor some of these Venezuelans. So he, out of his good heart, because he is very generous, He has 2 homes. So in that other home, he brought in 4 Venezuelans. Happened that one of them turned out killed his own brother. But little did it come out in the news. It did not come out in the news here in El Paso, of course. Yeah.
So just to add to what you're saying, the challenge that we face with those people coming out of those countries, as I've indicated earlier, as far as security threat, you've got intel operatives that are here to collect information on us, and they're tied into networks of the Russians and the Chinese. Right now we're in a proxy war in Ukraine, and if you think that the Russians aren't going to take advantage of using them as their tools to be able to influence action in our hemisphere, you're asleep. But not only that, there are people that are coming in that are good community organizers, and they have been trained by the Cubans. And we know for a fact that there's been some in Miami that have been part of the organization of the Black Lives Matter and Antifa groups that mobilize people against our own country. And the same thing has happened in New York. So when you're talking about all of those people that came out, not only do you have the criminal elements, but you also have the intelligent, bright, capable people that are here to cause us counterintelligence challenges, meaning they're here to learn about us, they're looking at our weaknesses, and it's a matter of time before they're going to act. And one of the things I used to tell the Mexicans when I used to work with them, the Mexican military, is that, look, we want to collaborate with you. We want to be able to come up with a way of having you share with us information about bad guys that are coming in, because if there's ever an action that's taken in the United States, some sort of terrorist activity, and it emanated from across the border, our relationships will be strained and they won't be good, and I fear that that's exactly where we're headed.
It is. Yeah, it is. I remember when the Cuban camps, there was a lot of people that Castro had sent that were working for him, but luckily they were all concentrated. Then when they're here, we don't know where they're all going, So that's the difference.
So, ma'am, first of all, thank you for your story. And this is exactly what we're talking about, where it's been mentioned, where our compassion, which I think the compassion in this country makes us the greatest country on the face of the planet, right? I mean, we swear in 100 million, a million immigrants every single year to be citizen. There's no other country on the face of the planet that does that. But do you see the story she just represented? Why I say our compassion is misguided? So you bring somebody in illegally, you know nothing about them, and then what do? They claim another American victim. Did you know that there's an organization in the United States? It's called AVIAC. It's Advocates for Victims of Illegal Alien Crime. We have an organization in the United States because so many Americans have fallen victim to illegal aliens that got away and now call the United States home. That's insanity. I mean, look, we've been working law enforcement our whole careers. We can't prevent every crime, but you know what crime we can't prevent? Somebody that shouldn't have been here. It's just common sense. Absolutely. I mean, how many more stories like that do we need to hear? I know we all know about the illegal alien that was deported 4 times, and a scumbag assassinated, executed 4 people, including a 9-year-old girl. Why is the whole nation, not at Capitol Hill back in D.C., standing there refusing to move until Congress mandates that our borders get secure and preventing something like that from ever happening again, while at the same time talking about improving legal immigration, right? It's common sense. How many more American victims? How about the 22-year-old girl who had an entire life ahead of her that was brutally beaten and raped savagely and then strangled to death? How about the police officer in California that was shot? How about the father that I've talked to that his son was killed by an illegal alien drug driver? Or how about Rebecca that just recently testified before Congress as tears streamed down her face recounting how her 2 beautiful boys under the age of 14 died from fentanyl poisoning? I mean, we could talk about this for the next 10 hours. How many more stories like that do we need to tell on top of the national security threat, on top of the drugs coming? I just don't get it. I don't get it.
And I will keep it short this time, Irene. Oh. So you guys weren't there last night. So what I want to tell everybody is we're talking about the national level, but you know what? We want to make it local. There are NGOs out there. There are organizations that are lying to these immigrants all the way from Venezuela. And we say NGO, we say, what's that? It doesn't mean anything to me, does it? Border Network for Human Rights. Anybody know those people? They act like they're big dogs here, right? They're nothing in Mexico. But yet groups like that locally, we need to go after them, okay? We can't just say, oh, they're all corrupt. Well, who? We need to target them. We need to say, hey, you know what? I've met with the people that hold signs for Border Network for Human Rights. And like this gentleman here, you hablo poquito español, just poquito, right? And so I talked to them and I said, hey, what are you doing? He says, well, we've been working here for 15 years. And I said, are you still here legally? Yes. So how are they helping you? And they stop and think, wow, wait a minute. They're not helping me. You know, these are the type of people that say, if you work with us, we will help you. They're not helping. They're the ones who say that, you know what, we're not humane. We're killing all these people. No, putting these people out there for 15 to 20 hours, 12 to 15 hours a day in the hot sun and not getting them legal documents, that's inhumane. So El Pasoans, we need to put a stop to it. We need to stop BNHR and all those other groups that are completely helping kill these people. Thank you so much.
Well, let me address that real quick. H.R. 2, what Mark talked about, the legislation just passed, that's going to address the NGO abuse. And also, Mark Green, the chairman of the Oversight Committee, who me and Mark have a great relationship with, I've convinced him to have oversight hearings, specifically targeting the NGOs on the billions of dollars of taxpayer money they're getting to be complicit in alien smuggling. So it's coming. It's coming fast. Look, I know we're getting to an end. I want to say something when I had a chance to, and I want to bring Rodney Scott up here also. Rodney, if you come up. Look, El Paso is a great town. Some of your best residents in this town are the men and women of the United States Border Patrol. Now, I wore that uniform when I started my career, and it's the proudest days of my life. I buried Border Patrol agents. I buried ICE agents. I've consoled the spouses of fallen officers. These guys and women, these men and women are in a bad way right now. They got zero morale. They've been abandoned by the president. They've been abandoned by the Secretary of Homeland Security. The record number of suicides of the Border Patrol is the highest number of suicides percentage-wise of any law enforcement agency in the world. So when you see that green uniform, say a thank you. If you can't stop, say thank you, put a thumbs up. Rodney just left. I wore a uniform for a few years. Rodney's worked for 3 decades. He just left as chief a year ago. I want Rodney to share with you what these men and women are going through. So when you see one of them, please give them a thanks. Give them a thumbs up. Give them a smile. Because they've been abandoned by the administration. They've been abandoned by the commander-in-chief and the secretary. But they can't be abandoned by the American people, and I know they're not going to be abandoned by the El Paso residents, because you guys stand for truth and justice.
Thank you, Tom, for those kind words. And I can just tell you from my experience in Border Patrol, a little over 29 years, El Paso is a very friendly city to the agents most of the time. But I think that is very critical now, and I would say all law enforcement, but Border Patrol and CBP right now are really, really taking it hard. There's not a lot of support out there. You've heard the defund the police stuff, things like that. But no other organization in this country that I know of has had somebody come in and fundamentally change the duties and the responsibility. Well, the responsibility is the same, but the duties of the law enforcement officers like Border Patrol has had. So you guys see it here, but let me explain what the agents see every single day right now, what the agents know in the back of their mind. So in the media, we talk about this mass migration coming across the border and everything we've talked about today, which is critically important. But the agents know that illegal immigration in and of itself is a crime, but they know more instinctively from their experience that the cartels control every single thing that crosses this border. They have for years, and whether they're paid directly or not, the cartels use the illegal aliens as human shields. What I mean by that is they script the crossings to overwhelm law enforcement, specifically the Border Patrol, so that they can then bring in the second wave, the criminals that are willing to pay them a lot more money to not put their fingerprints on a scanner in front of Border Patrol, the terrorists that we may or may not know who they are, but they're afraid we know who they are, and the endless flow of narcotics. There is no shortage right now, unfortunately, of fentanyl, cocaine, or heroin in any of the cities in the United States, not just the border towns, right? It transits through here. The agents know that's what's going on, but yet they're forced by this administration to respond to the groups, hundreds at a time, you see them here, of illegal aliens walking across the border wanting to surrender. Because someone has coached them, whether you want to call it an NGO or a cartel, they've coached them on how to lie. And unfortunately, and I was raised a Christian, I've had this conversation in my own church and some of the universities, unfortunately this social justice movement has gone completely astray within a lot of churches. So a lot of churches are sending people down there and they're coaching them how to lie on the asylum interviews so that they'll get released into the U.S. The cartels need that because it creates this endless flow of human beings that they can script the crossings and create huge holes in the border security where there's not a single Border Patrol agent. You saw it, and they talked about it in Del Rio, the bridge. But that's going on as we speak right now, right here in El Paso. There are thousands of people lined up, or at least hundreds, at that gate 42. But what you're not seeing is that little city, that soft-sided facility that, by the way, just for 250 people cost about $5 million to set up and another $5 million a month to continue to operate. But that was just the first tent. Each one they established expanded that more. That wipes out all the Border Patrol agents. That's a huge national security risk and threat. But it's also demoralizing because the agents know while they're standing there that that person's lying to them and they're processing them and they're going to be released out the gate. They know the cartel is kicking our butt, bringing dope across this border, bringing criminals across this border, and it's taken a toll. I talk to a lot of them, but just kind of like the theme we've had here, think about if you guys go to church, you've heard the term small groups or your network. That's what really matters. So if you can use your network and small groups here so that it's not just coming from me, it's not coming from some talking head, but that they know you guys appreciate what they do and you want them to hang in there, and they at least know that you're coming to meetings like this and you're listening and you're going back and sharing a message. It's hard for me to explain how much that means to the agents, how much that meant to me when I was in uniform, to just know not necessarily another guy in uniform, but the public I'm trying to protect was also trying to protect me. This is America. We all work together, and that message can mean a lot, whether it's just liking something on social media, making sure the agents you see at a 7-Eleven, Circle K, or am I in the wrong state? Just kidding. The Speedway, just making sure they know. But it is unbelievably demoralizing right now. And here's my big worry. We have hired Border Patrol agents. I didn't mean to take too much time, but we hire Border Patrol agents in waves as there's been these cross-border threats without a lot of thought about the fact that they all become eligible for retirement at the same time. My entire group, my generation of Border Patrol agents, they hired a massive load of us at the same time, are all now eligible, or they're becoming eligible to retire. A lot of them could stay another 7 years. They're demoralized. They loved the job a year ago, but now they're like, why? I don't want to be part of the smuggling network. So they need every little bit of encouragement that they can to stay on, because if we do win, not if, when we get this back, we need that experience out there so that we can re-secure the border. Because when both of us, right, on January 20th, 2021, the border had never been more secure in my entire career. And I don't care if it was Clinton, Obama, Bush, my entire career, every day the border was getting more and more secure until Biden put a pen in his hand and signed executive orders on January 21st to tear down everything we spent 3 decades building. That's what's in the minds of the Border Patrol agents today and the CBP officers. If you think about it too, we forget about the ports of entry sometimes, and I promise I will shut up. But those guys now, because this administration is trying to hide the illegal immigration, they're trying to hide the problem, not solve it. They're not trying to slow anything down by shoving a bunch of people into the port of entry and paroling them into the United States right now. So if El Paso's upset about anything, it should be restricting lanes on the bridges and the increased wait times. That is directly related to this mass migration. And by the way, that's across the whole nation, not just here. But that's not what the CBP officers signed up for either. They didn't sign up to basically process fraudulent asylum claims. They signed up to do a law enforcement job, to find narcotics, find people trying to get into this country under false documents or whatever, and to make sure that we facilitate that trade and travel, because we really are reliant on a lot of other countries for our goods. and they're getting just as demoralized because they're being taken away from that mission. So please don't forget them either.
I just wanted to say, first of all, I'm a naturalized citizen, and I'm not brown-skinned, but I am, and I'm very proud of it. As you know, El Paso also borders the state of New Mexico. New Mexico is not quite like Texas. I live in a middle-class neighborhood, a block from a K through 8 school, and a couple of weeks ago, a home in my neighborhood was raided, and there were 12 illegals sitting on the curb waiting for the Border Patrol to put them in a wagon and take them away. How do I help and protect my own neighborhood?
So 2 ways, and again, I always kind of come back to it. The thing that makes America great is you and the community. So simple things like community watch, just knowing what's going on in your neighborhood and not being afraid to actually ask some questions and know who your neighbors are and kind of know what the traffic patterns are. So DHS had this cheesy saying when we first started. We still use it a little bit, but it totally makes sense. If you see something, say something. Don't be hesitant to reach out. I know El Paso, the closer you get to downtown, the little better it is. The farther you get out, though, response times for law enforcement, you have to take that into consideration. So the quicker you make that call, the better off. And now this sounds really cheesy, but over my entire career, I think everybody would vouch for this, almost better than the gun on my side sometimes was a light and a camera, because they don't want to be seen. You know, the aliens that are surrendering, they're walking right up to Border Patrol. They're not really going to do anything. They really want to surrender. The people that are trying to get away, they don't want to be seen. So simple things like motion cameras, or motion lights and cameras, and or even a real camera can do a lot to keep people away from your property and protect you. But please report the stuff in.
And look, it's important. If you see a load house, we call them a load house, you got to report it, because I guarantee you someone in that house is being abused. Some female in there is being sexually assaulted. Some child is going to be sexually assaulted. I just not hyperbole. I've done this for 34 years. I've hit many stash houses with warrants in my day. And I found a guy hog-tied, his entire face wrapped in duct tape, his entire head, duct tapes, hog-tied, hands and feet behind his back, with a hole poked in the mouth with a straw. That's how he breathed for days. I've hit load houses where they call the parents, they call the relatives of the smuggled alien and say, you owe us $20,000 and you got to wire it to this account. Well, we agreed on 10, but now it's 20. Pay us or we'll kill them. And they did. I've had many cases where they call the families up and they torture the person while the family listened. They couldn't pay the smuggling fees. One case they did, they stabbed the alien in the face over 20 times. That's how they killed him. So look, what happens in these load houses is terrible. Terrible. So if you see a load house, report it, because you're probably going to save a life.
You know, I was in by the way, I lived in El Paso for 2 years. I was the FBI special in charge of the El Paso office. Yep. I love El Paso. Desert Canyon, lived right there, still remember. In fact, tonight I may drive by the house just to look at it. Yeah, West Sider, sorry. Yeah, so to footnote on something that Tom said. So I was here, and I was embedded with the elite Texas DPS Criminal Investigative Division. And we hit a stash house. I've seen tons of them, but I want to bring up this one because it's going on right now. And we went to, it was in a hotel, and a lot of hotels now are being used for stash houses. There were 14 single adult males, 1 single adult female, and 1 unaccompanied 11-year-old girl. Think about that. We go in there, there's feces all over the place, food all over the place. There are 2 beds sitting there. An 11-year-old. We have no idea what happened to her.
Are there signs that we can be looking for?
So that's a good point, because what I was gonna say, because I love this question, and everything that they say I agree, but there's 2 other things I think are challenging, and one of them we've already talked about: compassion. So I think a lot of people, look, there's no way that there is a stash house in a hotel that somebody doesn't know what's going on. There's no way that there's a stash house, a real house in a neighborhood, that somebody doesn't know what's going on, right? So there is leakage. Somebody somewhere has got to know. But I think there's a couple of things happening. One is that compassion again, right? They think they're being compassionate by not reporting it, when in reality, the opposite is true. As Tom said, we have no idea the savagery that could be going on in that stash house. But I can tell you this, that they are treated like animals. They are treated like cattle. They're treated like a commodity. That, I guarantee you, is happening. The other thing is, I think we're afraid. I think we're afraid to get involved. I think we're afraid if we get involved that you're going to be called a racist or you're going to be called something bad, right? So a little bit of this is I think we have to get over and identify that our compassion has been hijacked, and it's actually the opposite of compassion to let it go on, and then there's got to be some courage. And I know that can be challenging. I know that can be a risk. I've got it, but we've got to stand up, and we've got to fight against this. And there are, and we can help you, there are signs that you can see. There are very obvious signs there, and we can help you with that, to identify those signs, because they're pretty easy to spot.
I'm going to answer real quick. A couple very, very simple things. This is very anti-America 2023. Go say hello. So the number one way that the stash houses is turnover. So we do the same thing with warehouses in San Diego Warehouse District. You never are ever going to know really what's going on in there every day, but when a house goes vacant and then new people move in, just go say hello, and you're going to know pretty quickly. There's all kinds of other things. Believe it or not, the landscaping vehicles and the delivery vehicles provide awesome cover for getting people in and out now. They're not actually always landscaping. But if you see a landscaping vehicle, like one of the enclosed trailers being pulled up a lot, and you don't see them getting equipment out and mowing the yard, that's kind of a clue. But the number one thing you can do is just walk over, broad daylight, knock on the door, say hi, you'll know. Go ahead, ma'am, I'm sorry.
Gee, thank you for coming. And we thank our beautiful Irene out of Methodist Jackson for providing all this. Hey, Irene, huh? Oh my. Hey, you six, actually I'm going to counter in, you seven are helping to defend our constitutional republic, and we are very grateful. One thing I want to pass on here, folks, it's our Texas legislature. We have the power. You need to help me call the Speaker of the Texas House, who for the second term since 2021 has denied passing the bills that our Lieutenant Governor gets through the Senate. That's Dan Patrick. And the bills are to defend us with this monstrous border insecurity that we have here. So it is Dade Phelan. He also has not yet defended our children from the outrageous gender assault, the massive child abuse against children. So if you please write this down. In my club, all my ladies are making the calls, okay? Dade Phelan is the Speaker of the Texas House. His number is area code for Austin, 512-463-1000. You can also call his home, because he really needs to know that, for me, I call him and I tell him, I'm firing you. This is the second term. You've done nothing to defend Texas, nor our constitutional republic. How outrageous. We are the people. We have the power, as these men and ladies have presented for us. His home line is 409-795-2777. Please, let's do it, folks. We got to defend Texas and help our republic. God bless you all. Thank you. Hey, we're not fighting flesh and blood. You guys better know that. Our pastor can tell you. Not flesh and blood.
Does anybody else have a question or a comment?
Good evening. Thanks again for being here. I relate to a lot of the folks up there. I retired ICE after 8 years. I'm also a retired Navy after 34 years, so I got you bested. And I worked at ICE headquarters for 6 years, and then I finished out my last 2 years here in El Paso working with HSI. So I can tell you, we spend on detention services. We don't have the capacity to house everybody, so that's why we do the catch and release. So we probably have, 12 ICE-owned facilities, if I remember correctly. We spent, at least when I was there, these are 2017 numbers, we're spending $4 billion a year of your taxpayer money just to house the detainees that we had the capacity to hold. Now, we thought we had a problem in 2013 with the Rio Grande Valley crisis when we were getting, 35,000 a month? And now we're getting, 200,000 a month? So the other thing that a lot of people don't know either is you don't grow immigration judges overnight. That's a very specialized part of law. And if you have an immigration judge, guess what? You got to have a courtroom, got to have holding cells. You got to build the infrastructure. Right now, it takes, if you do legal immigration, if you do your app and you pay the fee, it takes 13 years for that application to go from the top of the pile to the bottom of the pile. Probably processes in less than 2 months, but it takes 13 years. So, you know, we need a better process to get these applications through the pipeline. But the other thing that was mentioned was how these illegal aliens or immigrants are abused. I can give you testimonials, but one thing that wasn't mentioned is some of these immigrants are actually killed and their organs are harvested so they can sell their organs in the black market. So can you imagine that? That ought to incense everybody in this room. Okay? 2 anecdotals. I was in Virginia. The cleaners that we used to take our clothes to, the young lady that was running the business, she was an employee. She didn't have papers. Her brother, they lived in the projects. Her brother was basically bullied into joining the El Salvadorian gang MS-13. He resisted until they told him, if you don't join us, we're going to hurt your sister, your siblings, and we're going to hurt your mom. We know where you live. My wife is a retired school teacher teaching in Fairfax public schools. She had a student, 7th grader, straight A student, star soccer player for the school. When he became an 8th grader, all of a sudden he started failing all his classes and he dropped off the soccer team. Reason he gave? Same reason. MS-13 pressured him into joining the gang or else they were going to harm his family. So the bottom line, I'll finish with this. A lot of these illegal immigrants that are coming into our country, they don't assimilate. They're disenfranchised. Another gentleman I talked to worked for, and the sad thing about this is the Latinos abuse their very own Latino race. You would think they'd take good care of them, but no. They work them like slaves. They work them for 2 weeks, and then payday comes, and they go, no hay dinero. Me trabajas otra quincena. So they come back in 2 weeks. They work 2 weeks. Now they've gone a month unpaid. And a couple of gentlemen that I talked to finally said, after 6 weeks, they said, forget it. And they leave. And you ask them, well, why don't you report them to the authorities? I don't have papers, so I'm afraid to get deported. That's how they get victimized, by the way. So keep that in mind.
And there was a really good point that was made there, and that, you know, last year there were 2.2 million, million with an M, apprehensions at the southwest border. That was FY 2022. That's the highest in history, 25% higher than the previous record, which was set the year before, 1.66 million. And yet, Joe Biden is asking Congress in his FY 2024 budget to cut immigration detention by 25%. Right now, the United States government spends $1.4 million per day on detention funding it doesn't use. Detention beds are literally sitting empty because the Biden administration refuses to put anyone there. Last year, and Mark will confirm this, there were 39,000 removals from the United States involving criminals. That's the lowest number in decades. There are murderers, there are rapists, there are kidnappers that the Biden administration refuses to remove. You wonder why MS-13 proliferates in Fairfax County? By the way, any of you aren't familiar with the National Capital Area, Fairfax County is one county away from Washington, D.C. It's, 10 miles or an hour drive, depending on D.C. traffic. And yet, some of the largest CLICAs of MS-13 are in Fairfax County, Alexandria, Montgomery County, and Prince George's counties, Maryland. They proliferate there because the population isn't like you. They don't believe in their community. They're not tied together. They don't even know their neighbors. They have no idea who they are. There's no sense of unity or responsibility to an area in which most people are transients. And so consequently, demagogues get elected to office and they tell you we need to be a sanctuary. We need to protect our immigrants. Remember what that gentleman just said. Almost all crime committed by aliens in the United States is committed in immigrant communities. The people that suffer the most are the people who live in that very community. It is false humanity to allow individuals to continue to be victimized, and yet that's what's being done in your name. And remember that. You're sovereign. Everything that we talked about tonight that's done is being done in your name.
Hi, I'm Dolores Chacon Chavira, and I live in the Segundo Barrio. Actually, it's the first barrio, first ward, but I was raised in the second ward. With this new Title 8 coming in, and are we going to see the cleanup in Segundo Barrio?
No, absolutely.
Are we
not.
going to get it? Is it going to get worse?
Yes. Yes, because Title 8. So, all right. So Title 8 is what we've always been using, right? That's the basic immigration law. Title 42 is not immigration law. Title 42 is a public health order. So when that goes away, we go back to the regular law, Title 8. But here's the problem. That's what we were using under the Trump administration, which we had the most secure border in our lifetime because we were actually following the law. So it doesn't matter what the law is for this administration because the Secretary of Mayorkas of Homeland Insecurity, this is the Secretary the first time in our lifetime where a cabinet level official has come in and he's viewed the law as a mere advisory opinion, right? This is a secretary that abuses his authority, has abdicated his oath. He's rewritten law. It's the first secretary in our lifetime that is directly mandated that the men and women in his charge, the law enforcement agencies, to actually violate the statutory mission and the laws that they're supposed to enforce. So Title 8 is irrelevant to this administration. Here's what's going to happen, right? Instead, when they continue to come across, instead of being removed under Title 42, they're all going to file under Title 8. And what that means is more are actually going to be released because that's the strategy right now. The strategy is not deterrence, consequence, and integrity by reducing fraudulent claims. The strategy right now is 100% catch and release. So you come in, they know the magic words on what to say when they file an asylum claim. They're going to be processed. They will not be detained. They will not be removed. They're going to be released. Now, you're still going to see some removals under Title 8. It's called ER, expedited removal. But to a large extent, that's mainly going to be applied to Mexican single adults. Everybody else, the other 170 other countries, the overwhelming majority are going to be released in the United States.
So they'll be staying in the Sacred Heart area?
Well, no, because not necessarily because El Paso, just like most border communities, it's a throughput. The majority don't stay here. They stay here long enough. They're in stash houses until they just get their next movement into the interior United States as they go forward.
Thank you.
And I'll just add, it's up to you. This sounds cheesy probably, but they're invited there. You have, I won't name it, but you have an organization that is willing to provide shelter, food, care, and has basically invited them to be there. You're part of the community. If you speak out and make yourself known in a polite manner and make people understand what the second and third level implications of all this is, You can control that, but unfortunately, that property obviously is privately owned property. The people that are manage it have literally invited those people there and continue to invite them back. So even the city of El Paso will have a hard time with that. We were over there this morning, and the police were actually trying to make sure people weren't standing in the streets, that they had to stay on the sidewalks. They were using the laws that they could, but they couldn't really make them go away because they were invited. And I want to touch on, go ahead real quick, and then I want to come back and touch on how there's solutions to all this, and it's not that hard.
Thank you very much. I really have.
Hold on. Okay. Are you gonna have? Do you have a question? Okay. So these are the last 3 questions. Okay, just so we know that.
No, thank you very much for coming and revealing all this to us, and I really appreciate that. But there was just one part that I'm concerned about, is that they're telling us that these illegals will eventually be allowed to vote. And that is also a problem, if they're allowed to vote.
They don't have to vote. I mean, that's her belief. They're future Democratic voters. But when Joe Biden signed 90 executive orders killing everything we did, he also overturned the Trump census rule. So these millions of people now heading to sanctuary cities across the country will be counted in the next census. So when they proportionate seats in Congress, that's going to result in more seats in the House with Democrats. They sold this country out for what they perceive as political power. It's almost treasonous.
So I want to just add to the voting. If you'll recall what happened under COVID, we changed from a voting day to a voting season. In Virginia today, we have a voting season of 45 days. I have a young lady that works for me now. This is all legal, by the way, because I've followed the law. She's living with us because she's partnering with my daughter. I said, go vote, because in Virginia, you can register and vote on the same day as long as you can show that you're living in a particular place. And in our case, she was. But imagine the number of people that can come in that don't have to prove exactly where they vote. We're talking about harvesting ballots, and I don't know what the laws are here in Texas, but we used to be the example for fair and free elections. I've observed elections in Mexico. We had the thumb, turning purple. I did 2 in Venezuela. When Chavez got elected, they were clean. We knew the answer to who won by 10 o'clock that night. In the United States, how long did it take us to find out that the current president is the guy that got the most ballots? Because it's not votes, it's ballots. And this is what's happening. So the short answer to what you're saying is the possibility of that happening is more likely. A Mexican general asked me one day, he said, why am I getting a ballot in my box to vote in your elections? He says, that's not legal, is it? I said, no. I said, well, I didn't think so, but he said, this is what I got in the mail. So the answer is, it's a problem.
Yes, thank you.
Good evening. We're so happy that you came this evening to be with us. Thank you, Irene, for organizing this group. I'm Catherine Gilbert, and I'm also the president of Shield a Badge with Prayer. Prayer is the most important thing that we can do in a situation like this. I've lived long enough to see many, many things happen. It breaks my heart to hear about the children. The children are always in the way, seems like. They're always being hurt and criminalized. The thing I want to say this evening is that the Bible says to speak to the mountain. This is a mountain that we're having to try to deal with in this nation, in this city. I've lived in El Paso all of my entire life. I've never lived anyplace else. I love this city. It is my home. I raised my children here. My mother and dad came here in 1932. They also lived here all of their entire lives. We are to pray like we have never prayed before in our entire lives. This is a situation that we have never dealt with or had to have to deal with it. So words are powerful. Words are very powerful. The most powerful thing we can do is pray. I'm president of an organization here in El Paso that started in 1999, and it's called Shield a Badge with Prayer.
We pray for our first responders every day. We have people, around 2,000 people in El Paso, that have committed themselves to pray for our first responders in this city. We feel like that this is something that is vitally important, and I think it's more important now than it's ever been before. We need to lift up our first responders in this city. We have a board of directors, and we have a retired policeman. We have a retired CIA. ICE. We have a retired FBI man. We have a current fireman that is a board member. We have 3 retires border patrols. We realize how vitally important it is to pray for our first responders in El Paso. If you desire that you would like to pray for one of these first responders here, please see me. I'll be glad to match one up for you to pray every single day, to be committed to do that. I thank you so much for coming today and giving us all this vital information that we truly need in this city to be able to know what we should do, but I do believe that prayer is the answer.
First of all, amen to that. And ma'am, you talked about the children. So in the first 26 months of this administration, their open border policies have incentivized and encouraged over 340,000 unaccompanied minors to self-separate from their families in their home country and make the track, turn their lives over to the cartels. Tom has already talked about that 30% of these young women and children are sexually assaulted and raped. Many of them die on the journey, and if they survive the journey, once they get in America, many of them then are thrust into the life of trafficking. Okay, full stop. If that isn't enough to say, this is crazy, we must stop this. Oh no, it doesn't stop there. Right now, under this administration, once an unaccompanied minor comes, Border Patrol gets them and they remove them to HHS, Health and Human Services, who then take it from there. Their mandate is the same. It's very simple. Process as fast as humanly possible and ship them out to a sponsor anywhere in the United States. Here's what they don't do. They're not vetting these sponsors. 340,000. Do you think they've done 340,000 home visits? No. Do you think they know the home environment that they're pushing these unaccompanied minors to? No. Here's another. This administration has admitted they have lost track of 85,000 unaccompanied minors that have come across the border. Let that sink in. 85,000. They have no idea where they're at. Well, guess what we do? They're working in slaughterhouses doing entrails, right? I mean, we know they're thrust into a life of trafficking. It's unbelievable. Here's how it goes. A sponsor says, I'll sponsor a kid. They run a basic NCIC check in the United States to see if they have an active warrant or conviction. If not, no problem. They could be here illegally. They could be a known gang member. I mean, the list goes on and on. They have no idea. You know what HSS calls follow-up? 30 days after they release them to a sponsor, they make a phone call. A phone call. And they have no idea who's picking up the phone, right? It could be their uncle. It could be a fellow gang member living in the house. I mean, the list goes on and on. So again, we talk about this. Our compassion has been hijacked. You're being lied to. The most inhumane thing that we can do for the most vulnerable is to have open borders that will encourage them to self-separate, put their lives in the hands of the cartels, and open up a life of tragedy. And we talked about the gang members. In the FBI, I supervised an MS-13 gang task force in southern Los Angeles. MS-13's motto is rape, control, and kill, right? And right now, if you come in as a minor, the average age of minors coming in right now are 15 to 17. Guess what the perfect recruitment age for gangs are? 15 to 17. The 15-year-olds and 16, 17-year-olds that come in, they don't speak the language, they have no job skill, they have no familiar connection, and they have no means of financial support. They make prime gang recruitment targets. and it's happening every day, all day long. Again, our compassion and misguided, the most humane thing is to do is to de-incentivize illegal immigration and secure our borders.
I do have to add to that because part of my job is I watch congressional hearings all day long. The Biden administration set a woman up to talk about what a great job they do keeping track of the kids. They only lose 19% of the children that they release.
Oh, good.
She was so proud of the fact they have an 81% success rate. Almost 1 out of 5 cases, they just lose. Let that sink in and remember what Mark said. 85,000 children. If you were to take all the unaccompanied alien children, and I will make this short because it's getting late, and put them all together in one school district, it would be the 6th largest school district in America. If I told you that in the 6th largest school district of America, we could only locate 81% of the kids, but we're doing great, you would laugh. If I were to tell you that in the 6th largest school district in America, a significant number of the kids had been raped and physically abused, there would be congressional hearings from now until Christmas, and then they pick up again on the 26th and start over again. And yet the American people allow this to happen. It's shocking. Absolutely shocking.
Good evening. My name is Jerry Hallberg. I'm a lifelong citizen here of El Paso, Texas. And I wanted to share something a little different. I'm a teacher, a certified teacher here in the state of Texas. And several years ago, I had the privilege of volunteering with the public libraries to teach citizenship classes here in El Paso, very close to the border here. And I just wanted to let everyone know that becoming a citizen here in the United States is not the easiest thing to do, but I can tell you when we have individuals who do take that route legally and do go through the classes, and they're able to pass the exam, and they're able to pass the background check, and they're able to say, I will stand for America, I will defend America, I am a citizen of America. That is one of the greatest things that we can ever experience. How many other people go to how many other countries in the world? They all want to come to America. Why? Because we know, even though that there are difficulties, that this is still the greatest country in the world that respects all races, all genders, all religions, everyone. God bless America. And thank you all so much.
And again, I promise I'll keep it short because it's late, although I can't. But anyway, if you've never been to a naturalization ceremony, go.
Yes.
Go. Because if you want to see people who love America, people who want to become part of this country, go. I was a government employee. I got every other Friday off. It's part of the great perks of the job. And I would spend that every other Friday off going down to Baltimore, and I would swear in new citizens because it's the greatest experience you could have. Longest oath, my arm would get tired holding it up like this, talking about princes and potentates. But if you've never been, if you want to see the future of America and the best of America, and you want to know what you can do to make your country better, go. Because it's going to give you that strength that you need to push through to get done what you need to get done.
Again, thank you so much for coming to my beautiful city. I was also born in the Segundo Barrio, and I'm also a brown-skinned racist. But the reality is that we have a big task in front of us, but not an impossible task. But we need to know how we're going to get involved. The problem is we complain a lot,
and we watch the news a lot, and we get angry a lot, and then it stays there. If you can't do it for yourself, do it for the 85,000 children that are missing. It's not fair, guys. It's the most vulnerable people in our society that are waiting for us to do something. There's a lot of work to be done. We're gonna organize, because not only are we gonna take El Paso back, but we're gonna take America back. And we need to make sure that this doesn't happen again. We need to get men like we have up here back into leadership positions. But we need to make sure that once they're there, we're supporting them. Because I can guarantee you the media is not our friend. And they're gonna crucify them. I'm a nobody. And if you go to my social media, it's awful. I can just imagine what yours looks like. So let's make sure that today you decide that you're not gonna walk out and you're gonna complain. You're gonna walk out, you're gonna get active, you're gonna know who your representatives are. Unfortunately, I think we all know who our representative is here. But we need to retire her. We need to retire her. And we're gonna do it. We're gonna do it. But it's gonna take everybody doing it. Okay, this is not the land of Veronica Escobar. This is not the land of Beto O'Rourke. This is our land. So thank you so much all for coming out. I know that all of you are working, hardworking Americans, because I know you're Republicans, so I know you're working. But more than anything, I am so thankful that you all came and shared your knowledge, your experience. And please, please go back to your homes and tell them that El Paso is full of American patriots, of American grateful citizens. So thank you so much.